fixed.
Just have to wait for this to. Sometimes that's. It did.
I would like to call the March 2024 regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Could we start with a roll call?
Braddock, here. Buck,
Here.
Detmer, here. McSweeney,
Here.
Newman, nope. Paul,
Here.
Wilmot.
Here. The first item of business then would be approval of the February 21, 2024 regular meeting minutes. Is there any discussion or correction on those minutes? And if I could, I did have one, I didn't get a chance to review them, but this paragraph, Commissioner comments, page 3 at the bottom. I think it's actually my comments. I just didn't quite word quite right. So Commissioner Paul asked if there was any flexibility with language. He also commented that while reviewing, I would like to add the City of Petoskey Master Plan Action Item 119. So the City of Petoskey Master Plan, I would insert before action item. Regarding zoning maintenance, he felt it had perfect language. So I was going to add it after the word felt. And then after language for the intent of the MSHDA grant. And it had been previously approved. Just to clarify, it was a little worded a little funny. So. Is there any other comments, corrections? Any motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 21st meeting with the corrections Commissioner Paul made.
Second. So we have a motion and a second. Charlie.
Charlie did.
No further discussion, then I'll call for a vote. Just raise your hands if you agree. All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Take it. All right. Next on the agenda is old business item, which is labeled A. Master Plan 2024 Planning Commission Work Program. And it says Commissioner Paul, Commissioner Wilmot, and the city planner will present a verbal report. And I think we'll start with the city planner to lead that off.
Okay, hi. Commissioner Paul and Wilmot, we met on Monday to go over the action program that we had talked about at the last meeting. And we got into a little bit more of a detailed discussion relative to what we thought would be four key initiatives that we talked about. The first one was zoning ordinance revisions, which we're going to be going through as part of the grant process. Historic preservation was the other one, intergovernmental cooperation, and housing. So those would be the four work items for 2024. Then we went through the 163 action items and then decided which of those action items would be satisfied by going through those four components. So for example, under the zoning ordinance, there's quite a few that would be, as we went through the ordinance, that we could check off that are in the action strategy. So for example, we recorded the number of the action strategy, which is like number 19, and then what that action strategy is. So for example, under the zoning ordinance, we have a subsection called zoning standards. And number 19 was review the ordinance requirements for lot size, minimum house square footage, building height, density, setbacks, parking requirements. So we'll be doing that as part of the zoning ordinance update. And that falls under the zoning standard subcategory. We'll also be taking a look at things like lot coverage ratios. And non-motorized facilities, so that's how we organized it. The other subcategory under the zoning plan is there were two items that dealt with architectural standards. And we're not recommending that they have to be included in the code, but they at least have to be evaluated, and we have to decide if they're going to be included, or the planning commission feels that they're not going to be included, but we just have to address them one way or the other. So under architectural standards, number 6 was to evaluate the zoning districts for the addition of form and architectural standards that complement the existing street patterns. We have vegetation standards. There were 3 action items that talked about native species, vegetative buffers, and climate adaptable native species in the action plan. So we'll evaluate those. Then there was a general category that it's referred to as other standards that would fall under things like incentivize designated garden space and affordable housing developments. Allow structures such as hoop houses and greenhouses in all zoning districts. Allow backyard poultry and rabbits for personal use in residential neighborhoods. And allow apiculture in zoning districts subject to reasonable standards and approval. Now, like I said, these are action items that are in the master plan. We organize these by subcategory under the zoning. It doesn't mean they have to be included, but they need to be evaluated. Okay. The next topic that we're recommending as part of the action plan is historic preservation. There were a number of action items that dealt with reevaluating the National Register districts, becoming a certified local government, which then, if we're local certified government, we can apply for state funding on historic resource projects, creating a local historic district in the downtown, and creating a study committee, and then revising the East Mitchell National Register district, for example, and additional districts themselves. So historic preservation was one of the priorities that we selected, recommending for 2024. The third one is intergovernmental cooperation. We noticed that there were some action items that were just bigger than the city of Petoskey. For example, one of them is number 151, to continue work with the Harbor Petoskey Area Airport and Pellston Regional Airport to fund and improve air access for the region. That's something that's beyond the city, but the city is obviously should be involved in that. So we thought there would be an opportunity under intergovernmental cooperation for example, we were talking conceptually that the chair and the vice chair of the Petoskey Planning Commission would meet with their counterparts in Bear Creek and Resort Township to discuss some common areas of concern. One would be non-motorized facilities, trails, multimodal transportation, any other type of issues that we all have in common. For example, when we reviewed the Resort Township Master Plan, they had some action items regarding US 31, 131, and 31, which I suggested that when they get ready to do a corridor plan for 31, that we be involved. So it's all integrated. So we thought intergovernmental cooperation would be a really nice first step. And we would start at the PC level of meeting periodically with our counterparts to talk about these issues. And then part of the thinking was also, possibly inviting Emmett County Planning Commission or the Emmett County planning staff to come to the intergovernmental meetings to talk about some broader issues. The fourth and last work item was to get into housing and to try to put our arms around all of the various housing programs and actually develop a housing strategic plan for the city that talks about new housing, revitalized housing, housing quality, and all of the other components that go into a comprehensive housing strategy. So those were the four areas of concern that we talked about, that we should kind of focus on efforts in 2024. In addition to the regular normal stuff that comes in, like site plan reviews and things like that. So that's kind of the overview. I'll let Charlie and Ted chime in if they want relative to how this was organized, but we kind of like the way that it turned out relative to.
Yeah, we figure it can all be done by next Tuesday. No, just to elaborate, we decided that it was a good way to organize the action items that we've been discussing periodically over the last couple of sessions. And working from this master list that was created by John to talk about, ongoing short-term, medium-term, so forth and so on. And as we began to go through it, we realized that there were a lot of them that were in common under these different topics that we've assigned. So not that we have to take action on all of these action items, but we should keep them in mind as we engage in one of these, assuming that these are the topics that the commission wishes to engage in, the zoning ordinance revisions, for instance. Keep in mind all of these action items as stated in the master plan, and evaluate whether they're worthy of further consideration or just putting along the wayside or whatever the case might be, but keeping them in mind since they are itemized in the action plan, in the master plan.
And I would say, yeah, it was especially we were thinking on zoning ordinance revision standards, we'd need to have some kind of a table or a list in front of us of things as we consider each section, just kind of to mentally go through and make sure we checked off the boxes we were supposed to be concerned about and not lose them. Besides so hopefully, I mean, it's difficult to do. We three of us looked at it. If any other commissioners felt there were other items that were missed, we certainly could add those. There was a few items in the master plan action list that were kind of one-offs that didn't, there's a few other things that didn't fit in these categories, but they seemed a little lower priority. I mean, I would say they're lower priority, but there was a question about a space for a dog park, space for the farmer's market, not that they weren't important. Some other people might be looking at these. It would be more like if we suggested, there was a few things like that that didn't make this list. This is not every inclusive item in that list, but it's most of the bulk of it organized this way. I did notice, at the time I didn't, but now I noticed that there's John, a couple items that seem to be the exact same thing.
I saw that 20.
I guess, but I guess that's the way it is, right? They got listed. So, and then I have a question. There is a few things that are in here, but I'm not sure that they're things we do, but they're part of the topic. Like on the first page, 91, development incentive program to promote use of remote parking, use of non-motorized facilities to decrease downtown parking demand, develop an incentive program. I don't know would we do that? Or I mean,
No, that'd be the zoning.
it would be the zoning code. Okay.
Some of the zoning ordinances today are, if a business owner provides so many bicycle parking spaces, they can reduce their
Oh, okay.
free parking.
Okay, so I wondered about a few of those items. So those were my comments. Maybe just open it up again to anyone's comments about the general structure, and then
One other comment that I have is, we found after going through all 100+ action items, we found that these four categories really seem to be the leaders in terms of checking off a number of boxes in the plan. So that if you can look at it as if these are the priority categories in the action plan that the action plan is asking the planning commission to deal with. That doesn't mean that we want to set our sights in 2024 to deal with them, but quantitatively speaking, this seems to check off a lot of those boxes. It's a big list.
Yeah, so other commissioners, any comments, thoughts on just this draft of this work plan?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you for putting this together, the way it's organized. It makes sense. That list we got before, I mean, it was pretty daunting.
Mhm.
So just to have it laid out like this and organized, it's appreciated. So thank you.
I just have a quick question. What is the zoning map? How does that relate to all of this?
Where,
The zoning map.
The one that we have here?
that's gonna be our next conversation.
Okay, gotcha. And then looking at the zoning standards, line 19 and 119, they're repeats of each other.
Mhm.
So how does that go about?
Means we have less to do.
And 20.
We recorded them down.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think the attempt was, we had a couple doubles in here, but that's how they're listed in the master plan. So when we do one, we will do both, I guess.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay,
just-
redundant. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a great list, and I also appreciate the work that you guys did going through and putting this together for us. And when I see this, like, I feel like the zoning map is our number one thing in the zoning, and then we can tackle the zoning ordinance. Because without knowing our zoning map and the zoning district,
Potential district
Yeah,
changes or
exactly.
consolidation.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like that should be one of our main focuses is potential rezoning of the districts.
You mean consolidation of the districts?
Or, I'm not sure,
Review.
how we wanna proceed with that.
Getting that set before we go on with the details of the district. Right, yeah. Right, that makes sense. I guess for me, it would be helpful, maybe, John, if we, like, if two items are the same, we would just write it out once and under the number, we could put 19 and 219 and 119 or, yeah,
yeah, I'll go through and make that
Yeah.
change. I got notes on it.
then there's less.
If the PC is, if you're comfortable with this, I'd like to attach this to the annual report that you saw the draft last time. That's got to get transmitted to city council for information only, so they know what the planning commission is going to be taking a look at 2024.
Well, I think she's made an addition that probably ought to go at the top under zoning standards. And that is review of zoning districts.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
It's like you did with the other with no number associated with the dash.
Yeah,
Because she makes a good point, you know, to take a look at the zoning districts and get an overview of whether or not consolidation is appropriate, some form of simplification, or maybe we need 100 more.
No, I don't think we need that.
and we kind of talked about that, but it'd probably be good to.
But it's not, it's
formalized.
He's right, it's not articulated in this.
I don't know if we need to go through each one and talk about it.
What's that?
Well,
List of the zoning standards that we're gonna try to hit on.
well, I would say for tonight, these are part of the master plan. It is what it is. If someone thinks there are items that shouldn't be here, are in the wrong order, or if someone found something that we missed, I think that's what we might do tonight.
Well, wants to articulate the priority of which of these we should deal with in what order. Any action that the planning commission would care to make in terms of this list to state where we're headed is perfectly appropriate, I think, tonight.
I think the purpose of this process was that we know that we're gonna redo the zoning code. So what action items in the master plan relate to the zoning code that we need to evaluate? So we can either say that we, planning commission implemented that action, or they decided not to
Right.
implement.
Right.
That's the purpose for this.
The status.
It's really a status sheet. And it's like a check sheet to make sure that we don't forget anything that was in the master plan, so. it's a great way of correlating the planning commission's annual work plan with the 163 action items.
So I would say that it seems like the commission, prior to this, has been of a consensus that our real focus this year is on zoning review and evaluation. Generally speaking, so the so-called first category, zoning ordinance revisions, right? The other question that I would ask you is, as you look at this, do the other three categories, as we can get to them and or learn, have presentations or whatever the case might be during the course of the year, do they also look like appropriate priorities to keep in mind for this year?
Yes, I would say, yes, definitely, zoning ordinance revisions, housing, I think. Historic preservation, that has been kind of at the top of our list for quite a while, and it feels like we haven't had a lot of traction. I guess, what does that look like as far as, getting going on these? Does each one have, do you put together a committee
Yeah.
to tackle certain things,
Well-
or,
Planning commission as a whole is gonna work on zoning.
okay,
First thing under historic preservation is establish a study committee. So some of these are bigger than PC, they involve more people. So the idea here would be working with Shane, the city administration, and probably the mayor's office on putting together a study committee that would involve somebody from the planning commission, maybe the downtown group.
John,
Plus some other people in town that have a historic preservation background.
there is already a study committee created by
Is there?
city council for the downtown historic district, yes. And
Okay, that's for the downtown.
Yeah, the DMB, but it has not advanced.
no, it's not the downtown management board, it's a downtown historic district study committee.
But wasn't the president of the downtown management board charged with getting it organized and getting it going, and that it has stalled?
No, it was Becky.
That's what I meant. Becky.
And Becky has, left her position now.
Right.
But yeah, our committee met 5 or 6 times. We photographed the buildings. We have begun some historical research. So there is a standing committee that exists.
But the focus is on the downtown.
Correct, because that's where we thought the most jeopardy was happening as commercial properties, because there were a number of proposals to renovate buildings and to tear down and replace buildings that could implement downtown. And so, houses are being changed all the time, but we thought that the downtown neighborhood, downtown commercial zone was the most.
Well, it simply comes from the master plan, create a local historic district.
Yeah.
In the downtown.
Right.
Yeah, that was the,
Downtowns, as I'm saying, was deemed to be more important than the residential neighborhoods initially.
Yeah, so the study committee that you're talking about is to analyze the buildings downtown with the outcome being a possible local historic district.
Yeah, there's a legislatively mandated process. Once a study committee is
Yes.
created,
Correct.
the committee writes a report and to the community and to the city council, and then the council decides whether to pursue that recommendation of the study committee.
Correct. And then if they want, then they create a local historic district commission.
Correct.
And they create by ordinance the local historic district boundaries, which would be the downtown.
Right.
Okay. What's in the plan, master plan is that component plus analyzing other areas in the city for national register status.
Right, although, personally, I think that's kind of a waste of time if time is critical, because being listed on the National Register doesn't do a thing to protect the building. It's pretty much honorific.
Well, but it does provide tax incentives for income.
Tax
producing
incentives, yep, there are rehab tax credits.
That's up to 30% now.
Right, for commercial buildings, that's an important consideration, but to me, doing it for residential neighborhoods, I mean, there's a lot going on. Lots of houses are being negatively altered every week. I drive around and see another historic house that's biting the dust because of some insensitive remodeling that's being done.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that we discussed, the three of us discussed, was that a lot of the master plan calls for protecting the architectural, the historic character, the charm of the residential neighborhoods, but if you don't have a mechanism that tries to protect that, then you're gonna end up with a lot of the, basically, character erosion where people are doing inappropriate modifications and ruining the historic character of the neighborhoods, which people value. So, you know, my experience, Rick, is that creating the National Register District provides all of the material in the photography and all of the background work needed to quickly move from that into a local historic district. That's been.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a state mandated process once a study committee is created. And some of that is overlapping or duplicative, I guess, probably, but
Yeah,
I think most people don't even know that their house might be listed on the National Register. You know, your house is, Matt, it's listed on the National Register. And Ted's is as well.
I didn't know that.
well, you see, and then the other thing in communities that, you know, I come from a background probably as a planner with preservation roots. And in the communities that I've worked with, I've recommended that if you have a house that's on the National Register that you haven't inappropriately modernized, like I'll use Ted's house for an example, is that those houses, then the property owners are qualified to buy a plaque from the as a National Register home. So they can actually put the plaque on their house that this house is on the National Register of Historic Places.
Yeah, I had one I bought for my house.
Yeah. And that's a way of community recognition and, you know, people see that and then they go, wow, this is on the national, it is, it's kind of an honor. But then it's also community, it's also an educational part for the
Yeah.
community.
But I could change anything I wanted. I could even tear it down.
Oh, yeah,
There's,
I agree,
you know,
I agree.
But I think that even just the recognition and then that there are tax benefits you can get at could be helpful.
Yeah, the other part of it is that
Incentives.
I've used the National Register District to create a historic overlay in the zoning code, which the state preservation office absolutely hates. Because I figured out a way to get around doing the local historic commission.
well, I was gonna ask you about that term overlay district, because I know that there were some communities that originally got into historic preservation doing overlays, historic preservation overlays on the zoning ordinance, but is that still a viable approach?
Yes,
Well, I just want to point out that this initiative is really just around evaluating the possibilities.
yeah,
Since it does appear in the master plan on so many different occasions, and it's been batted around so much, to just simply during the course of the year, create enough research into the pros and cons of this, that we either decide not to go that direction or we decide to go that direction. That's what the intent of putting it in here.
Right, yes.
Not that we wanted any specific types of historic district, because we don't know.
Right.
He might know, you might know, but we don't know.
yeah. That's a good thought. A lot of people misinterpret National Register District, what they can do and can't do versus a local district, what they can and cannot do.
And by the way, the same applies to this housing category at the end of the list. That's really there to give us parameters for what we need to learn about the potential for different kinds of funding sources, perhaps. And so that we can intelligently create directions that might be valuable to the community.
I'll make the revisions. If you're comfortable with it, I'll attach it to the plan, the annual report, present it to council so they know what the PC is going to be doing. in 2024.
Well, I think there was an additional question about, I think the question was, what are we being asked to do in terms of implementation? Wasn't that your question, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to know, this is our work plan for.
How are we gonna-
And how do we jump in?
Well, we're gonna start jumping in with the zoning, the next item on the agenda.
Right, but the jump in on the others would be to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Create some kind of study group or committee, but in terms of government cooperation, at some point to consider whether our chairperson and vice chairperson should be encouraged to reach out to the other jurisdictions and get something going.
That's an easy.
Yeah.
Because the planners in Emmett County meet quarterly already. To talk about common areas of concern. We just think it's. Take it to the next step and have chairmen and vice chairs of the planning commissions get together and start talking about areas of common interest. And that's just good government, really, that's what that is.
I guess if we're gonna attach this to the annual report, I think we voted on that report.
Yep.
So we should probably vote to attach this. With a few changes we have.
Revisions, I'll go through and any duplicate, I'll do like you suggested,
Okay,
like 119 and 119 would be in the same box. Yeah, I'll make those changes
and then there was that addition.
to the zoning,
Yeah.
consolidated zoning map.
So is there a motion to attach this with revisions stated to the annual report?
I'll make a motion to attach this with the revisions we talked about today to the annual report.
Okay. Motion and second, is there any further discussion? If not, I'll just call for vote. Or we can raise our hands. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous passage. Is there any more than we need to do with this tonight? So this is just the framework. Obviously, we're good. The next topic is going to be dealing with zoning, so.
Yep.
Okay, so we will move on then. Yes,
Those from the master plan, and they stand for things, EV, EQ, and EC. Do you remember what they stand for?
Environmental equity,
yeah,
something like that.
Equity and economy.
Yeah,
it's in the master plan. Yeah,
yeah.
They're at the top of this comprehensive sheet.
Oh, that might be good to add to this.
I will, I'm gonna add that. I'm gonna show the council the 163 action.
Oh, all right, so they'll figure it out, hopefully. Never been done.
okay, well, then we will move on to item number 4, new business A, proposed zoning ordinance topics for discussion. I'll let the city planner lead that off.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to start the process of discussing the ordinance in terms of generalities. First thing I wanted to point out was that this is information only. We did put together a project website, and this is what it's called, petoskeyzoning.org. This is a cover of it. On that website, we posted a lot of resource documents I would encourage you to look at. That it's hard to read on this. I just wanted to give you the picture of the site. But there's the existing zoning map is on there. We've got publications from the state, the Michigan zoning toolkit, the Michigan Municipal League pattern book. There's a publication from AARP on the benefit of accessory dwelling units. So as I come across resource information, we'll post it to the zoning sheet website. As we prepare articles that we're comfortable with for community review, we'll post the proposed articles on the web in order to start getting community feedback. And then eventually, as the website evolves, we'll actually put a email in where they can attach a document, send an email through the website along with any of their suggestions, so we could take a look at them as part of the process. I don't want to, I want to be as transparent as possible with the community on the preparation of the code, especially the more important parts of the code that deal with zoning districts and dimensional requirements and uses that are going to be in the various districts. So that's the project.
John, is this available through the city website as well?
I will get with Lisa to have a tab on the city website that would, you'd click it and it would come to this site.
Yeah, and then maybe some news banner that it's available or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, that's how we usually do it. That way I don't have to rely on the city to update it. We update it as we get information. They can have it on their website so they can direct people to this one here. The one thing I wanted to, we're not gonna go through it this evening. This is really food for thought. But when we start talking about zoning districts and opportunities to consolidate, you need to have an understanding of what land uses are in what district. The easiest way to do it, we found, is that we put together a regulated use table that shows by land use where these land uses are either permitted or allowed under special approval. So you can get an idea of where these are all clustered and how many zoning districts have some of the same uses in them. So it's a useful tool when you want to if you want to discuss the possible consolidation of zoning districts.
So S stands for what and P stands for what?
P stands for permitted, S stands for special approval.
And what's the asterisk?
Asterisk is that it's permitted. In some cases, it has a supplemental regulation that goes with it.
So again, special condition uses. They're allowed, they just have to meet the conditions.
Correct.
And currently is that doesn't come before the planning commission anymore.
Yeah, especially.
It does.
Yes, and it comes with a public hearing.
Right, okay.
Permitted by right are ones that Lisa would, if they don't require a site plan, those are some of the ones that Lisa just issues a zoning permit for.
Mhm.
But this is a handy tool, like I said, when we start talking about districts, and if there's any inclination to consolidate some of the districts and group some of the similar land uses together. So that's food for thought when we get further down in that discussion. I wanted to give you an idea of, this was actually asked, this was an ask by the city council. They wanted to see where all of you got what, 7 business districts in the city. So they said, can you show us a map where they're located? For a while, they had the map on an easel over here in the corner of the room. Council was, when we were talking about short-term rentals, because they're allowed in the business districts, they wanted to see where they were allowed. And then we also, by doing that, noted that we have 7 business districts in a community of 8,000 people. So then you have to ask the question, do we need 7 business districts? So that's going to be part of the conversation as well.
I guess, John, I have one comment at this point. So we have a table we just saw tonight, table 1 regulated uses by zoning district, and that gets at one element of a zoning district, the uses. But these districts can vary by setback and building height also.
Yes, sir.
So I wonder how, if you were considering the whole picture, you'd have the uses and then the physical form, be it setbacks, building heights, and then you could really understand the districts more. I
Yeah, you
think,
got it. I think I'm not all that, I haven't been I wasn't part of the drafting of the code, but I think that in some of the cases, the variety of the business district has a lot to do, not with as much as the uses as it does the dimensional height requirements.
right,
So,
so people need to have that in front of them, so they know what they're talking
and
about.
then there's,
Yeah.
again, there's opportunities in areas where you want to have higher height or lower height. There's always the opportunity to use an overlay district to manage the dimensional requirements rather than create an entirely new zoning district. So those are the things that we will explore.
And you would have more experience on this, but again, when you get to the comment of confusion, is it simple to use or relatively simple? The overlay is, I don't know, is that simpler than having more districts with overlays?
Very much so.
You do think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one thing that we need to get away from in the current code, and it can be very frustrating for Lisa. If she was here, she would tell you, is the code is based on what it's referred to as a pyramid. So you have uses that are in one district, and then you read the next district and it says, oh, by the way, all the uses in this district are allowed from this district are allowed in this district. And then some of the ordinance says, if you're in this district, all the special uses that are in the previous district are now allowed in this district as permitted uses. And sometimes she has to create almost like a organizational chart to figure out exactly what's either permitted or not permitted. It is. So when we create the districts in the future, they need to really stand on their own. Now, there can be some uses that are in several districts, but the way that we should be looking at it is, let's say we have a piece of paper and this is the CBD. Okay, let's say this is the B1 district. Well, if somebody were to come to Lisa and said, I have a piece of property in the B1, what can I do? What can't I do? We should be able to give them one sheet of paper that says in one column is all the permitted uses, the next column is all the special uses. And then there's a table at the bottom that says, oh, by the way, these are all your dimensional requirements. Instead of somebody having to go through 60 different pages of the zoning code to try to figure this out. So that's how we simplify it.
So John, my question is, doesn't matter what happened in the past, but why don't we just do that?
we can.
So like what we have now, if you get to the 5 steps down the road and everything that preceded it was added, and there's the B1, the B2, all the B1 plus the, plus the RM1, the RM2, the R1, the R2, the R3. So, and then they just list maybe the things we added. It wouldn't have been that hard to list everything. And then you'd have one sheet and it would be.
More pages, but it'll be.
What uses are allowed? Instead of saying, look at the 5 different things that preceded it and we're adding these ones, you could actually list them all on a piece of
On a
paper,
piece of paper.
right?
Yeah, the other thing too is we're in the process of wrapping up the zoning code in Harbor. One of the things that they noticed was when we went through this analysis was the only thing that differentiated their residential districts was the dimensional requirements.
Mhm.
And it really wasn't the rear yard, because that was the same
Right.
in almost every zoning district. The front yard was a little bit different, but when they really got down to analyzing it, if you take a look at the historic pattern of the community, take a look at the Sanborn map downstairs. Because I refer to those a lot when I'm doing a zoning code. Is that typically a lot of the dimensional requirements that are in the current code have no relationship to the historical development patterns that actually happened in the community. So when somebody says, well, the front yard setback needs to be 25 feet, and you apply that to a neighborhood like over on Madison or Jackson, where the front yard was only 15 feet away from the property line. All of a sudden, all those houses are now non-conforming in terms of the dimensional requirements. So what they did, I mean, if you're familiar with Harbor, when you come into town on Main Street, you got all the houses that are pretty close to the sidewalk. Then you got the porches that extend. So what they did is the front yard setback is basically the averages of the houses on the block. That's the setback, front yard. So you measure up all the front yard setbacks, all the houses that are currently existing, you take the average, and that's what your setback's gonna be. Then they came up with the idea, because they looked at their zoning board of appeals cases, a lot of their cases had to do with front porches. People want the front porch to extend further out, and they're not enclosed, they're unenclosed. So the planning commission said, well, the front yard setback is gonna be the average of the block, and we will allow people that want to put in a unenclosed, like historically appropriate front porch to extend 7 feet into the front yard. So then the side yard setbacks were very easy. It was 12% of the width of the lot, or 8 feet, which is ever greater. So as the width of the lots expand, the side yards expand, the front is based on the average of the block, the rear is always 30 feet. So they go, well, if we did all that, then why do we need 3 residential districts? We solved it. So they collapsed all the residential districts into one single family by going through that type of an analysis. That's what the planning commission needs to do when you take a look at your zoning districts here.
It sounds like a winner. What Ted said, though, is actually seems to me to be logical step number one, and that is to take the existing zoning code and reworking it so that all of the elements for each zone are on one piece of paper per zone.
Yeah, yeah.
And that way you can then set zones next to each other and compare more effectively
Yeah, that's fine.
than this mess that we have now.
Right,
And that in itself will be a task.
yeah, but it might shorten the discussion. Once you got that, it's like, okay, I can see. You know, we all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, when you. The meat of the zoning code is the determination of the zoning districts, the land uses that go into the zoning districts, and the dimensional requirements. And then once you get through that, then you have any other standards that you want to apply for special approval cases, if you want. The other parts of the code, the site plan review, the plan unit development, the zoning board of appeals, the enforcement administration provisions, a lot of those are based on state statute. So the real local part of the code is this stuff. The rest of it is kind of statutory language that we have to put in it. But the real meat of it is creating what districts you want, what's going to go in the districts, and what the dimensional requirements are going to be. That's the bulk of the work. The rest of it is just kind of putting the state statute around it and then putting a bow on it. But that's where the work is starting right here on this type of stuff. So I mean, if you want, that would be probably one of the first things we do then is take each of the current districts, put the column permitted special land use dimensional requirements. So when you take a look at them, I don't know how many we have, 15, maybe you have 18 zoning districts overall. You're gonna have 18 sheets that's gonna have all the stuff on it. And then you can decide if you want to keep them, if you want to trim them, if you want to consolidate them, you know, whatever you want to do.
Well, then you have 7 business districts and you have
Yeah.
how many residential, right? And you just take them one.
Component at a time.
But the 15 really includes all of them, right?
I can't remember. It's
Roughly.
it's in the teens,
Yeah,
how many you have.
that would be residential and business,
And manufacturing and all that,
Right.
hospital.
industrial, hospital, yeah.
Now, are you suggesting that we do this in bite-sized pieces, where the first piece would just be looking at potential consolidation of districts based upon of these criterias. And I guess the reason why I'm saying this is just perhaps a little concern if all of a sudden I see us a group could easily get down into the weeds of trying to start to tweak some of the setbacks as they start to look at some of these districts. And I'm just wondering, are we gonna just like look at the consolidation and then go back to visit kind of some of these more
Yeah.
descriptive
Yeah.
features then as kind of a second phase behind that?
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Paul is recommending is kind of what happened over in Harbor. We didn't get into the sheet by sheet, but it was kind of the same situation. Let's analyze it by district. Take a look at the dimensional requirements. And then when you lay it all together, you can start seeing areas that duplicate, areas that maybe you don't need. So that's where the discussion can come from. But that would be a discussion that's held at the planning commission. And then once the planning commission says, okay, let's consolidate this district, let's remove these uses, let's do that. Then we'd flip that into the zoning committee to do the wordsmithing on it. But I think the broader issues have to be discussed at this level. And in fact, I was asking Lisa, and she indicated before COVID, you folks used to meet in the community room. And that's where I would like to start meeting. So we're all sitting around a table and we're all working as a group.
It was a little easier.
It's a little bit easier doing that. So we're gonna investigate doing that now that they have Zoom capabilities over there now. Maybe starting, because these conversations in the future are gonna require everybody to lay stuff out on a table and kind of roll up their sleeves and have some conversations about it.
And then would be a relatively big move, maybe consolidating districts or changing district lines or whatever we do. So that would probably involve obviously some public input,
Yeah.
potentially some interaction with city council.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as part of this process, I mean, we created the website, but as part of the process, as we go through this, once you complete this part of it, in terms of planning commission saying, okay, we're recommending either changing the name of the districts or maybe creating a larger district that maybe used to collapse 2 or 3 together, whatever the outcome is. You get to that point, that's where you want to have a community open house. Let people come in and talk about it and give feedback. So you don't go too far down the road and then have to kind of retool everything because there may be some community concerns. So yeah, there'll be a couple of opportunities for community open houses and input directly into the process.
I have a question. Do you feel like our residential districts need to be consolidated, or is it more the business districts?
I don't know, because I really haven't gotten into the details myself.
So what did Harbor have as far as residential districts, like
They
2?
had 5,
Oh, they had 5.
now they've got 2.
And then what is their downtown and then their sort of like newer commercial
They had-
state road? Is that 2 different
They
commercial?
had 4, 5 business related districts. Now they have 2.
Okay.
They collapsed the TR, their transitional residential, which was the area like on Bay Street that's has commercial on it and residential. They made that part of the CBD and they put an overlay to protect some of the houses that are still there. They had a B1, a B2. They put the B2 into the CBD classification. They have B1. They had ROS, which was residential office service. They put that into the B1. So when they started doing like what we're talking about here, comparing them, they
Yeah.
thought, geez, some of these are really,
Yeah,
they have a different name, but they're really the same bundle of uses.
right.
So-
I mean, I feel like we have the same thing going on with our 7 business districts, but they're all based on location, I think is what's really driving the differences in our ordinance, based on setbacks and where they're located, parking requirements, all that good stuff.
Well, those are the bigger issues. I mean,
Yeah.
in some communities, they're getting rid of parking altogether. Okay, two communities have gotten rid of zoning altogether. I'm not an advocate for that because that means you're gonna have chaos.
Yeah, which two are these?
Well, there's different extremes. I mean, you've got communities that are saying, you know, we want to get out of the zoning business. You have other communities that are, every time they have a issue, they create a new zoning district or a new regulation. So, you want to be kind of in the middle. But there are other broader issues that you need to think about. For example, in some communities now, they're allowing by right duplexes in single-family districts. They're allowing triplexes as special uses and quadplexes. You'll find that in the zoning materials on the website. There's the whole issue of ADUs, which I know that here, they're kind of tightly regulated, but in other communities, they don't really seem to have a problem with them as long as there's certain standards that are applied so somebody can build it, you know. An interesting thing here, excuse me, was a variance request on Madison where the people that own 3 or 4 rental units wanted to sell them. But the issue that they had was that there was a detached dwelling unit in the back. So they asked the planning commission if they could divide the lots. Well, we look back at the Sanborn maps, and sure enough, back in 1905, each of those houses on Madison had a second dwelling adjacent to the alley. So those were today's ADU. And ADUs were prevalent back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They've gone away somewhat, but now they're starting to cycle back. Those are community issues that the planning commission needs to talk about. I think some of those are even greater discussion items than reorganizing the districts here. Because
When you think about this, how do you know, there had been this push to not let local units of government control short-term rentals. So we've had this discussion before about any moves we make. Some people would look at the short-term rental possibilities and say, well, right now we control those in the city, but there was a push in the state, had been, may still be, to not let local units of government regulate them.
actually, the current legislation, I'll get you a copy of it. The current legislation that's going through committee review is has nothing to do with local control. It has everything to do that the short-term rentals are going to have to pay an annual fee to the state, and they're going to start having to pay kind of like what is comparable to a state income tax on the rentals, and then supposedly the state's going to harvest all that money and then redistribute it back to the local units based on the number of short-term rentals they have. It's there, that's the whole thing that kind of emanated out of Traverse City, where the Conference and Visitors Bureau has filed a lawsuit saying that the short-term rentals are benefiting from the Convention and Visitor Bureau tourism taxes because they're providing all the promotional materials and the commercials that actually attract the short-term rentals, but the short-term rental property owners aren't contributing to the promotion. So there was a lawsuit down there, and I think it's migrated, some of that philosophy's migrated to Lansing, that it's not really a level playing field anymore. So I'll find where that's at and I'll provide a copy of it, but that's kind of, I know the Michigan Municipal League and MTA, Michigan Township Association, are really in favor of what that legislation is. So,
But you know, it wasn't that long ago that there
oh yeah,
was a push.
no,
It might have gone away for now,
I've
but
gone away from now.
So, just so happens, we have 19 zoning
Let's so
districts,
sit in the teens.
19. And in addition to the 7 business districts, there are 5 residential districts.
Does that 19 include the new hospital district? and
2 hospital districts,
Oh, 2.
2 industrial districts, and an office service district, separate from the general business districts. And that it does include, it's probably not fair, it does include parks as a district and PUDs as a district, so it's probably, you know, things that we are gonna be attending to is more like 12 to 16 districts, because we can't affect the hospital districts either. So.
I think this is all, I really like the direction that we're talking about, the discussions, and I'm just, you know, for myself, I'm just sharing that, you know, I'm really trying to keep an open mind on the reason why we had these many districts to begin with. Maybe there's a very good reason. And I'm looking forward to taking the time to try to understand, you know, the natures, because I think about our community, and the central business district is completely different than Spring Street. And, you know, there could be very good reasons why we have so many districts in terms of kind of protecting, preserving the character of certain parts of our community. So I know I've been on, keep an open mind in terms of, you know, why do we have this meeting to begin with?
Right.
Well, in terms of action items, recommended action items and planning and scheduling for next steps, you've given us some homework, voluntary homework that we can start to do. Some of this we've already seen, like the toolkit, but it's always good to go back and revisit it, right? So what are next steps?
Well, I think we're gonna finalize it. It looks like it could be the first Saturday in April. Was that the 6th?
The 6th.
It's gonna be the joint meeting with the city council. That's when most people can attend. So that's the kind of the kickoff to the broad topics. We got to get a feeling on what the city council's parameters are relative to what their comfort level is before we go down that merry road of rewriting the code, because we, you know, it's eventually going to come to them for adoption. So it'd be nice to know what their thoughts are, and that's part of the, hopefully that'll be part of the discussion in April.
But in the meantime, couldn't we actually get started with this?
We're starting now.
Breaking it down for
Yeah.
the individual, like
Yeah.
these individual.
Yes.
And would that be something that you and your firm would be doing
Yeah, we're handling the
over
zone.
and above what Lisa's already doing?
Yeah.
Because she's pretty overwhelmed with her day to day.
Yes, we'll be doing, preparing that.
And does this qualify under the grant? Does
Oh,
it, so the grant allocations can begin immediately in this regard?
Yes.
So are you looking for much more tonight? or-
No, I
Okay,
just wanted to give you some information for thought, wanted to give you the website. Take a look at some of the materials that are on there. No decision making tonight. I just wanted to kind of, you know, this is kind of softening the beach up a little bit. Get everybody thinking the right way, and we'll have the meeting in April, which will be 2 weeks from now, with the council. See where they want to go, what their concerns are, and then we will try to have every month some part of it ready to go for review. And then, based on the consolidated thinking with this group, then eventually things will start going to the zoning committee for wordsmithing. So.
I
But
guess
yes,
we don't have public here, but we do have a
yeah,
couple
people
on
on
Zoom.
Zoom, I don't, no one's raised their hand.
So if anyone wanted to open up for any people who want to, from the public, want to make a comment on this.
If there's anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Yeah, we got a comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it's Albert Boss, 510 Hillcrest. I just appreciate the huge task that's before you, and it's something I know you've been working on since
Can
I've
you
been.
speak up a little bit?
Are you hearing me okay?
Kind of muffled,
Okay, is that better?
a little bit, go ahead.
Okay. I really appreciate the work you guys have been doing. And, you know, I've been monitoring your work since the issue of height in B3A. Will this work plan that you've been discussing, I think you said you're going to attach it to the minutes. or forward it to the city council. It would have been nice to have it to follow along as a member of the public, but that will be available for the public to look at.
Yeah, anything that the planning commission reviews as a draft, we will be posting on the website and making it available to community to review.
Great, okay. I understand the need to consolidate, and it sounds like we do have a huge number of residential districts and business districts. But I really think it's important to look what the underlying thing was that caused those districts to be created and keep that in mind. I'd hate to see that we get to one size fits all, because then we'll be back at what John discussed as cities that just don't have zoning at all. Why even have zoning? My biggest concern right now is the erosion of R1 and R2. If you look in the zoning thing right now, on section 400 for R1 and R2, it currently states that they are the most restrictive of the residential districts. The intent is to provide for an environment of predominantly low density, one family detached dwellings, along with other residentially related facilities. That is what's if you look up zoning right now, this goes back to John's point before of having everything on one page. But in 2022, which is still doesn't appear in the zoning thing, but it appears stuff where it says laws or ordinance enacted but not yet codified. 787, ordinance 787 was for the ADUs, but embedded in the ADUs, it modified section 400 to read that the R1 and R2 single-family districts are intended to continue the historic development pattern of primarily single-family detached dwellings with 2-unit dwellings and limited detached, limited ADUs, for example. So that was already an erosion. And then we look at the discussion items and we look at what was in the grant, we're now talking about triplexes and quadplexes in our historically R1 and R2. That's concerning to me. The population of Petoskey, according to 2018-22 census data, was 5,865. The Bureau also says there's about 2,583 housing units, of which 56.8%, or about 1,477, just under 1,500, are owner occupied. That must mean about 1,000 units are already rental units. Once we add the Lost at Lumber Square, which is a great redevelopment, take an area that's already underdeveloped and it needs to be developed and make it an apartment building. I'm all great for that. Same thing with the Maple Block property. Great, that's an area that needs to be redeveloped. But to take historically R1 and R2 districts where people have lived for years and years and years and start putting triplexes and quadplexes in those areas, I just am really concerned. I think you want to really look at, the heart of Petoskey is the people who live here and have made 20, 30, 40-year commitments to the city. Not the developer who's coming along and helping us with rental housing and low-income housing. I think that's important. We can't staff anything downtown, but the heart of Petoskey are those of us who have made a lifelong commitment, or a rest of their life commitment to Petoskey. And those people have to be considered too, as you look at this. And if we add, I don't know if you add up Lost at Lumber Square, you're going to add over a couple hundred, 300 apartments, households. That's almost a 10% increase in household units. So I think we got to look, as we look at these residential districts, to allow more and more and more rental housing or multifamily housing in these districts is probably not necessary. And I've expressed before, and we'll be monitoring closely, and I was glad to see that that's on the topics to discuss with city council, is the importance of view shed in Petoskey. Not for the residents, but for our visitors and making sure that Petoskey is a great place to visit. So thank you for taking time to listen to my comments.
Thank you.
And I would just comment, tonight we've heard commissioners state, they really do want to look at all sides of the issue, so no decisions have been made, and we hope to have a comprehensive process involving the public and city council and go slow enough so we make good decisions.
That's all I have.
Any other?
Anybody else on Zoom? No one else.
If not, then, so we don't have any action tonight on this item. If everyone's okay, I think I will move on then on the agenda. Okay, so really next on the agenda, was public comment, on items, this is the open public comment for any items the public wishes to discuss, whether or not they're on the agenda. I'll just ask if there's any Zoom, public comments otherwise.
Albert, let me unmute him.
That previous or
Oh, Allison.
Allison? Did either of them have a comment?
Let's see, I don't want to make him a co-host, but I guess I'll have to. Go ahead, Allison. You need to unmute. Allison, you need to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you.
And did she want to make a comment or not?
She's got her hand raised. Allison, we can't hear you. You need to unmute your microphone. Not going through. And I made her a co-host, so she should be able to. She should be able to talk.
So I don't. Yeah.
Oh, okay, now, oh, she took her hand down, so.
Okay,
Albert, you have your hand up, you have a comment?
No, I just don't know how to put my hand down.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. Well, I think that's it.
okay, so I think we will move on then. Next would be commissioner comments. Rick, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I spoke with John this week and he suggested I bring this topic up to everybody, and that is, that's to do with, when somebody wants to build a new building, it's a rezone a piece of property, and then they have to apply for the permit. And this topic recently came up in the kind of consulting work that I did for the City of Mackinac Island Historic District Commission. They had an application, but there wasn't an application. Somebody wanted to tear down a historic house. And it's created quite a theory on the island. Come to find out.
Oh, microphone.
Come to find out that the city of Mackinac Island didn't really have any process by which, if you want to tear a building down, you have to actually pull a permit. Yeah, if you're gonna go to the building department, you have to pull a permit because you're gonna alter the building, but relative to zoning, should the city have the requirement that there be a zoning permit to be able to tear down a building or to move a building? I don't think we even have any permit requirement if somebody were to move a building, and actually in the past several years, two or three or four houses have been moved around in the community. So I just wanted to raise that as part of our larger process here. You know, one other element is administrative processes in the new master plan, and so that's a topic to think about, I guess.
Okay. Matt, do you have any comments? Doug? Carolyn? Charlie?
Well, my perennial comment is, what's going on with the sign committee, right? Well, now I can only kick myself in the rear because I was asked to join the sign committee, so I'll give you a brief update on what the story is with the sign committee. The sign committee has done a very thorough job over a long period of time. Thank you, Bethany. In updating and modifying the language for consideration by the planning commission and ultimately the city council. Most of that work really addresses administrative issues and textual issues. There are some other issues that I think will be roundly debated when that text does come to the planning commission, which hopefully will be next month. In fact, the draft as it currently stands should be finished on Friday. The sign committee will be meeting again on Friday to review it before it is sent out to all of you. So to give you a lengthy period of time to consider before being on the agenda at the next meeting.
So that will have like markups and show all.
It'll be in track changes, so it'll show all the markups and changes, proposed changes. And we will ask when it is distributed that you all give it some very serious consideration and try to get your comments back in track change form before the April meeting, so that we can have an organized conversation about your concerns and proposed changes and so forth. At least that's the current thinking.
That's all. Bethany, do you have any?
My only comment is, we are moving in May. I think most of you might know that. So next month is my last meeting.
Oh,
Yes, I won't be in the city anymore.
How about your parents?
No, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't have maybe we're doing a house swap with my parents, so. They will be living in town and we won't. I'm gonna miss it too, but I'm excited.
So I have no comments. Next would be updates from the city planner.
I have no comments at this time.
No updates. Huh?
No updates.
All right. Well, being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
7:17.
Made it.
Have you run one?
Yeah, we run it because there's another one here.
No.
I get stuff.